Hi, everyone. Welcome to this new conversation on doing sociology with Mayurakshi Chaudhuri. Today, we are going to talk about the digital and the social, doing sociology in an age of immersive experience. It's a very interesting new kind of topic, so I'm very excited to chat with Mayurakshi. Very quickly, let me introduce our today's speaker. Mayurakshi Chaudhuri is an associate professor of sociology and digital humanities and chair of sociology at Flame School of Liberal Education, Flame University, Pune. She is the founding faculty of digital humanities programs at IIT Jodhpur and currently serves as a member of the Board of Studies in Digital Humanities for Savitribai Phule, Pune University, India. Her research interests include migrations and mobilities, gender studies, historical sociology, technology and society, digital humanities, and qualitative research methods. She is the recipient of multiple international and national fellowships, the most recent of which includes a GSIS Eurolab Fellowship from the Leibniz Institute of the Social Sciences, Germany. Her research projects focus on gender, technology, and mobility, and she is currently the co-PI of a multi-institutional international digital humanities project entitled Digital Twins: Negotiating Identity and Translocated Heritage in the Global Age. This project is jointly funded by the Swiss National Science Foundation, the Ministry of Earth Sciences, and the Indian Council of Social Science Research. Mayurakshi, I'm very glad to have you with us here today, and welcome to Doing Sociology.
Thank you very much, Rituparna. It's my honor to be on this platform. I've heard, huge, big, significant things about doing sociology. I follow your blog, and it's tremendous work that you're doing. So I'm very, very honored that you have invited me here today.
Thank you so much for those kind words. And let me just, kickstart the discussion by asking you a very simple, basic kind of question about what exactly digital sociology is and how did this digital turn come about in sociology?
Great, wonderful question to start with, actually, the discussion. So I'm just going to touch upon history a little bit here. About 15 years ago, if I remember, 2008, 2009, sociologist Jonathan Wine officially proposed the concept of digital sociology in his journal article in Sociological Forum. From there, around 2015, sociologist Deborah Lupton writes her book, Digital Sociology, which I believe all of us are familiar with, where she actually opens her book officially declaring that, I quote, "We now live in a digital society." So from there, we see more and more work in digital sociology, on digital sociology emerging within the discipline of sociology. In fact, if we go even back in history around the late 1990s, computer scientist Mark Weisner actually predicted that we are in an age of the digital, that human civilization would enter an era of ubiquitous computing. And from there, we see that more and more digital technology has been touching people's lives to the point that we do not even realize that we are living in the digital world, and we have taken it for granted. So that sort of, in a nutshell, can be seen as a digital term, officially declaring digital sociology as a sub-area of sociology since the late 2000s, so about 15 years or so from back in history. And this also sort of goes hand in hand with a much longer history of the World Wide Web. So, so as you know, we have had at least 4 versions of the World Wide Web. So the Web 1.1, Web 1.0 was, the more static version of the web, where you see, information just being collected and being put on the website, and people just go to the website just to, have access to information, and access is something I'm not even debating here. Then Web 2.0 is something that brings in a more interactive sort of an element to how we interact with the information that we see on online. So this brings in the people to web sort of a connection. 3.0 brings in a much further sort of an interactive, authoritative sort of an interaction between web and the people. And 4.0, the one that we are all currently riding, is the age of immersive experiences. So this history of the development of the World Wide Web has, for a sociologist, sort of opened up multiple facets to look at. And I'm just going to touch upon, three fundamental facets here that, as sociologists, we need to look at. The first is to understand how have classical or contemporary social theories sort of evolved in response to the digital. For example, when I talk about Karl Marx's theory of production, relations of production, modes of production, how does it talk about, or how does it relate to the labor economy and production in the digital age? How does it talk about, digital politics and power? So these are questions that we need to look at, we need to examine, and to propose, new sociocultural theories that can be developed in response to the emergence of these areas of inquiry. So that's one fundamental asset I think the digital has opened up for the sociologist. The second area, and I think those of us who work with the digital encounter this quite often, is the nature of sociological data. As empirical as it can be, sociology as a social science, the nature of sociological data. So now we talk about big data, right? Spreadsheets after spreadsheets of numerical data. And it's not big just because of its sheer volume, but also it's big because it's networked. So, one data point relates to another or multiple other data points. So how does, this era of changing sociological data or this era of big data, for example, relate to something that many sociologists have conventionally understood as thick data, borrowing from Clifford Geertz's idea of ethnographic thick data. So how do we compare and collaborate these various forms of data to make meaning of what's going on in the digital age? So it's it's a great book by Darius Jamel Naik. I think he published around 2020. It's called Thick Big Data. So he actually talks about big data, combining big data with thick data, and proposes a new paradigm of thick big data. So this is another area of inquiry I feel that sociologists interested in the digital can look at, is how the nature of sociological data can change. And third, and most importantly, is doing sociological research in the digital age. So, the very process of, conducting, designing a research, we bring in concepts of, we say datafication of the society, we understand actor networks in different ways. So how can we, rethink doing research in sociology given the digital? So how have our practices as sociologists evolved in the digital age? So these are the three, fundamental areas I see from where I see, sociologists can sort of look at in order to understand how the digital is shaping the social and vice versa.
Right. You also have a lot of experience working as someone who has contributed to digital humanities. So what do you think digital humanities is, and how does it intersect with computational sociology? And a follow-up question would be, what are computational methods and how can they be used in digital sociology and humanities?
Okay, thank you for that question. before I go to digital humanities and computational sociology, I'm just assuming that we are aware of the disciplinary evolution of the humanities and the social sciences, sociology in this regard. So just assuming that, we understand that, what differentiates the humanities and the social sciences, sociology in this respect, are primarily the methods and the questions that we are asking, right? So now, I mean, historically, we see that the Industrial Revolution necessitated, the birth and the requirement of having social sciences to understanding changing natures of society, to understand changing, increasing imbalances in society, so on and so forth. And the type of questions that arise and the ways that we sort of attend to those questions would differentiate between the humanities and the social sciences or sociology in this respect. Now, having said that, digital humanities has a history, a formal history that starts around the 1950s, 1948, 1950s, when Thomas Busa, collaborated with IBM, and he created, an index variorum, which he calls the index domesticus. And what is important in that creation is a function that we take for granted today, the search function. The very fact that you can have a search engine and search from large bodies of text or large bodies of data is this creation, is what is a hallmark of Busa's collaboration with IBM to create the search function. And that sort of is taken as a formal starting point to understanding digital humanities. Years later, Jodhpur University, they did this project Bichitra, where they created Tagore's variorum. And these are some of the functions that they actually proposed through that project. This was funded by the Ministry of Culture. So, how do you search from large bodies of text? How do you establish connections between large bodies of text? So these are some of the advances that marks the history of digital humanities. Computational sociology, on the other hand, looks at more quantitative ways, in more big data definitions, in more statistical manner, until recently, where you also have a qualitative sort of intervention to understanding computational sociology, that you can analyze large bodies of text using software to domesticate the data, to analyze the data, to code that data, to thematically generate patterns from that data. So all of that is happening now. So what I see, currently is that I don't really see a hardcore separation between digital humanities and computational sociology. What I see a difference in is the questions that we are asking and the ways that we are, doing that sort of a research. So I don't know if I answered your question, Rituparna.
Yes, you have. So, could you also talk a little bit about how one could examine mobility and migration dynamics through data visualization, since you work on these topics? Of course, with a few examples from your own works.
Okay. Great. So, I've been working on migration and mobilities for a pretty long time now, but my intervention using the visual is very, very new. So I've been looking at the conventional journeys of migration, mobilities, so on and so forth. And I've been arguing how migration is a form of mobilities, but then it's also very nuanced. So, terming migration as a synonym for mobility can be misleading, et cetera, et cetera. But coming to the visualization question, the question of visualization is into migration studies is not a very new idea. So, we see, as early as 1858, the Emigrants of the World flow map that was proposed by Minard, Charles Minard, that sort of shows the migratory journeys of people across the world. So it's not a very new addition to migration scholarship. It has been there for quite some time. But what is new is the evolution, the technological evolution of digital tools have become more sophisticated to help us offer more granular, more nuanced stories, ethnographic stories, because migration stories to me are all heavy, rich ethnographic stories. So they're not just, flow diagrams. So, so those tools have sort of helped us, evolve into more sophisticated, evolve into more granular explanations of migration. For example, tools like story maps, story map generation, where you can actually show the physical movement of people along with tied with its ethnographic details. 1947 Partition Archive, if you check their website, it's a great resource for story maps as well as ethnographic resources of visualizing migration journeys. And then maps, I mean, by extension of just not, being static and tied to the atlas or the physical representation of space, maps can also be represented as social networks, for example, social network analysis. So software like MaxQDA or NVivo, which are qualitative data analysis software, they have evolved, much sophisticated ways of visualizing these data to produce network diagrams, to produce code matrices, so on and so forth. So something that has a much longer history is now only becoming more, sophisticated. It's now becoming more, granular, and also going hand in hand with the visualization wave that we are all riding. So, data visualization is, and it's probably on its peak now. And you see across the world, even in universities, in colleges, courses on data visualization are being offered. So, so this visualization in migration, as you asked me here, is just going hand in hand with that wave and just making more meaningful contribution to the migration literature.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense when you talk about it. One other thing is how does one look at the impact of the digital revolution on these intersections between, let's say, gender, family, and mobility, particularly in the IT industry?
Okay, so this relates to one of my works that I've done in the past, and a doctoral student has also worked on this. So we have looked at, particular IT population in India, in Bangalore, and we have sort of, observed them, shadowed them, researched on them from about 2017, 18 up until 21, 22. So what we find is, and we've done a very qualitative ethnographic sociological study in this, where we look at how gender is negotiated in the information technology population, and how is it impacted by the digital revolution. And interestingly, our study actually falls or strands the COVID moment. So we were not planning, of course, none of us were prepared for the COVID moment, but we find that our data sort of generates, has a trend, that we can call a pre-COVID and a post-COVID and a during COVID. So this is how we have also reported the data. So there are several things that arise from our study. One is, gender and employment and the impact on family work life balance, sort of that kind of an observation. which goes hand in hand with expected gender roles in household division of labor. For example, respondents talked about how, in a pre-COVID or during COVID moment, the division of household labor for some were sort of, equalized. And, there are interesting stories. I can forward you one of the papers that we published. We also saw interesting trends in gender norms and social expectations, communities' influence on gender roles. But the central story remains that expected gender roles within family, within marriage, sort of influencing the family work-life balance, which in turn influences the employment sector. So these are some of the themes that emerged. I will forward you the papers. Yeah.
Sure. And we can share some of these links with this conversation for others as well to read. Yes. Okay, so we've been talking about, digital sociology and humanities. So do you think that there is a need for digital humanities in the curriculum, and how can this happen?
Okay. I think this was during COVID that I attended a Digital Humanities Summer Institute online, of course, where one of the resource people actually said that in 10 years' time, probably the term digital humanities would fade out, because the moment you say humanities, it's assumed that you're doing digital humanities. So I take great inspiration from that, and I say, there is a tremendous need for including digital humanities in the curriculum, depending on the goals and vision of the program that you're designing, of course. What we see, historically, digital humanities has emerged, has developed as an arm of English departments. And, that has sort of been heavily criticized by scholars. What we need now is a more interdisciplinary dialogue. What we need now is a more, representation from various humanities, social science areas, computer science, domains, to have a more interdisciplinary dialogue before we propose an inclusion of digital humanities element in any curriculum. So that is something I always push for, is to actually highlight on this interdisciplinary dialogue. So I've been, I've worked on the IIT Jodhpur model of digital humanities, both master's and PhD programs. I've been on the board for IIT Indore's master's program in digital humanities. And also, as you mentioned, the SPPU degree, which will be soon launched. And the central principle that sort of strings through all these platforms that have been is the interdisciplinary dialogue. So at Jodhpur, at IIT Jodhpur, for example, DH is part of not any particular department, but I think they call it the IDRP, Interdisciplinary Research Platform. At IIT Indore, it's a center of excellence for humanities and the environment. So again, an interdisciplinary dialogue. And at SPPU also, it's pitched at a very interdisciplinary level. So this is something I always, flag that, if you are working with a digital humanities curriculum, make sure the interdisciplinary voice is there.
Sorry, I was muted. So we began talking about the digital and the social and doing sociology in an age of immersive experience. So how has this age of immersive experience influenced the doing of the sociology, if at all?
It has definitely influenced. How has it influenced? I mentioned at the start of this conversation, the questions that we ask, the questions that emerge because of the digital turn, need to be looked at with respect to this Web 4.0 age of immersive experience. So for me, I can give you examples of two projects that I'm currently working on. One is that relates to an area, a sub-area of sociology, which is visual sociology, for example. And the last ISA World Congress, for the first time, to my knowledge, had a panel on digital humanities. This is ISA World Congress of Sociology having a panel on digital humanities, and visual sociology was part of that dialogue. So this is a paper that I presented there, where my co-author and I look at comics as socio-cultural products. So we have seen technological advances that have aided digitization of comics, from paper books to digitized, PDFs or, immersive experiences of comics. But somewhere I think we are missing to understand the socio-cultural implications of these technological journeys. And this is what we argue in this paper, is that comics or any visual product, we should illustrate how these products are socially contextualized. So there's a lot of work that is left to be done. In fact, it's only starting now, so long road ahead. And with emerging areas like AR, VR, augmented reality, virtual reality, mixed reality, we need to be very, very careful how, what are we producing? And I'm talking from a sociological point of view, what are we producing and how are they socially contextualized? We should not miss the question in this technological journey. So that is one area I'm looking at currently. The second project that I'm currently a part of, and you mentioned it also, is the project of digital twins. This is an Indo-Swiss project that I'm currently working with. Sarah Kenderdine from EPFL is the PI. And I'm one of the co-PIs of this project. So this project is looking at negotiate. So the title of the project is negotiating identity and translocated heritage in a global age. So what happens, I'm talking from the socio-cultural point of view, what happens when heritage is digitized? What happens, when heritage is available to be viewed online? For example, we go, we go to see the Taj Mahal, and we, carefully choose on the calendar, or is it a Purnima or is it a full moon night? So we can see the Taj Mahal, in its splendor and so on and so forth. So now just imagine AR and VR giving us an option, sitting at home to see Taj Mahal, on a bright full moon night. Would we want to go and see Taj Mahal in person, or would we rather stay back and look at it, online on the digital? So these are questions that we are looking at the heritage site of Sarnath in this project. And on a larger scale, this project links with the idea of computational museology. So this is an area that is also emerging in the and going hand in hand with visualization, with big data and visualization, and also looking at when you are displaying, in this case, heritage as a museum element, as how museums are also hyper social spaces. So when we go to a museum, we usually see people very quietly observing whether painting or an artifact, but actually museums are hyper social spaces where people negotiate a lot of these relationships and identities. So when we take it to the digital, when a museum becomes digital, how are the nature of space and identity negotiation changing in that respect is something that we're looking at. The third project that I'm working on in this respect is an internal project on imaging and imagining Pune's architectural history. So here we are looking at the architectural heritage buildings within a certain time frame. Of course, there's the technology part of it, of digitizing and archiving, but there's also social side of it to understand the idea of the social production of space. So how is space not just a geographical given, but it is socially produced? And this is a out and out Henry Lefebvre sort of a venture that I'm doing in this project, is how spaces are socially produced. So these are some of the works that I'm doing, bringing in the sociological lens in an immersive age. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Mayurakshi, for talking to us today about digital sociology and the immersive experience of doing digital sociology. I'm very sure that this conversation will be very useful for particularly younger students who are looking to work on these particular domains and areas. So thank you once again for this very engaging conversation.
Thank you, Rituparna. Thank you again for inviting me here, and I'm glad you find it helpful. And congratulations again for doing sociology.
Thank you. Thank you.